Conflict, violence, and war has been in front of mind for so many of us for quite a while now, and I think specifically over the past couple of weeks. And when I set out to write this article, while I was researching, I was so overwhelmed by the amount of artists that were creating work that is considered anti war and anti violent uh, during the 20th century. And it shouldn't be surprising. I mean, I'm not trying to say that the Middle East is defined by the violence that has happened here, but the fact that there is a culture in the Middle East of artists continuously creating work that expresses, that attempts to understand, that looks for hope through all of the experiences that has happened to different groups and nations of people in the Middle East is something that we should all be very proud of. That artists, not only painters or sculptors, but also novelists and filmmakers, have really left a mark and have told very important stories in very innovative ways about the region, for the region, is something that we should all be very aware of and be proud of. So that was something that was really overwhelming for me. And I could have focused on contemporary art or included contemporary art in this article, in this listicle, but the article would have been huge. There's so much contemporary art that is in dialogue about anti-war and anti-violence. But I want to focus on modernism and modernist artists, so artists particularly in the 20th century, because I think that is a really important. Well, first of all, I love modernist art. I think it's amazing. I'm very passionate about it. But also, um, that period of time is so incredibly transformative, particularly for the Middle East and particularly for Arabs. It was a time when there was a plethora of influences and a time where Arabs across the region were really thinking about what it means to be Arab, socially, politically, spiritually. And there were so many things that were helped influence and shape those ideas. So, for example, from the West, there were so many influences within the art world and within technology as well, we should say, including different schools of art, different styles in filmmaking were very influential on Arab artists. There was also this real sense of pride and interest in Arabic, ancient Arab iconography. So whether it's the Sumerians, the Babylonians, or the pharaohs, a lot of Arab artists were looking back and trying to understand who we were in ancient times and trying to combine that with who we are now as Arabs and then who we want to be. And combining all of these things into a visual language or even in novels or into some kind of structure um, or themes to delve into to better understand who we are. Also, I think it was a time where Arabs were really trying to question who they are. How do we as Arabs remain true to the traditions of grandfathers and great grandfathers, but also be modern Arabs, be influenced by Europe, be influenced by the West, but also retain a sense of self? And how do we also do that while being pan-Arab? How do we also do that while being brothers to our Arab neighbors? So all of these ideas and concepts were coming out in the artwork that was produced at the time. And when I was at the National, I did a series on Arab films you should watch, and I split it into decades, so 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I think I also did 90s. And the most interesting decade for me was the 70s, because I feel like all of these themes, all of these ideas were really grappled with furiously in the 1970s, particularly after the 1967 war, which really forced a lot of Arabs to think about what it means to be Arab and to think about Arab brotherhood. Um, and so many of the films at the times, the writers, whether they were novels that were being adapted into screenplays or screenplays by Arab writers and directors and actors, all of them were creating such interesting films at that time that were exploring all of these various ideas, whether in very small, focused ways, looking at a particular group of people living in upper class Egypt, or whether it was looking at the whole region broadly. And I feel that's so much reflected in art, and particularly maybe these artworks that I selected for the story. Um, So yeah, so this is something that I think was really what I was trying to show in this listicle, the range of different ideas and stories and concepts that were coming out through the artwork. Um, and I think it's also important to mention that these artists in the list were not actively thinking about being anti-war and anti-violent. Not that I think of. I think those words is probably like a lens we're using right now to look at those artworks. I think at the time, these artists who, they're very diverse, men and women, some of them living in their home country, some of them in exile, some of them in diaspora, were all simply reacting to the happenings in the region. And they were trying to express that, understand, and reconcile, and create meaning from it through their art. And I think what's interesting is that these artists are all, like I said, they're very different, men and women from different parts of the Arab world, and they were all their styles were all very different. Some of them were, more Cubist influenced. Some of them were expressionist. Some of them were minimalist, abstract artists, and they also approached this idea of violence or this reaction to violence and war through various facets. Some of them are looking at public grief. Some of them were looking at mourning in solitude. Some of them were looking at focusing on a very, very specific moment. Some of them were creating work in reaction to a particular incident, while others were mapping out a history of the region or a history of a particular group of people or community. So, despite all of these various and different approaches and styles, I think what is a thread that links all of these artworks together is several things. First of all, that throughout all of that, there is a strong sense of, I can't think of a better word, camaraderie or brotherhood of what it means to be Arab, because these stories, while individual, feel very shared among the region. They're even universal. Anybody can understand and touch on them the way they have been expressed in these artworks. So it is a mourning of the self, and it's a mourning of what is happening to the brother or the sister in the region. So I think that's really important. A second thing is that despite how dark some of these paintings are, dark in the sense of what they're describing, there is also, in most cases, a singe of hope. There is some kind of hope there that things can be better. And I think it's important to know that, or important to think about, that when artists are creating work, most artists, when they're creating work, they're really trying to make sense of their feelings and the ideas that they are witnessing. So maybe that's the first stage. I think the second stage is this idea of communication, because when you create an artwork and it's presented, you are communicating with the viewer. And the viewer is not only experiencing, these stories that are quite dark, but I would like to think that some of them want to communicate these stories or give these stories a new life with a sense of hope for viewers, or a sense of understanding at least. And I do think that understanding lends itself to hope at some point. Once you understand something and you can analyze it, then you can hope for better and plan for better. The last thing I want to talk about was why it's important for us to know about these artworks and these artists. I think it's important for us to maybe redefine how we view the culture, how we view the region, that it's not only a culture that is, or a region that has been scarred by so much violence, but it's also a place where there is a richness of art and art practice and art making and dialogue within art. And I think it's not only about archiving and documenting that, it's about sharing and celebrating it and celebrating what our artists did. Because, these artists, these painters mostly that I have in this list, they were not creating these artworks as a means to document history. Maybe that's part of it, too, but it's not supposed to be a chronological, timeline of what happened when. They were archiving stories. They were looking at ideas of resilience and hope and emotional turmoil, and they wanted to capture what was happening to make you not only understand what happened and when it happened, but to really feel it. And I think that is a very difficult thing to do. So I think it's important to share that with others, or to just even educate ourselves. So I'm going to go through not all 13 of them because this video will be very long, but I wanted to touch on 3 of the artworks from the list of 13. 4, sorry, not 3. 4 of the artworks from the list of 13 that are very different from each other, the ones that have always left a mark on me. Some of them I was introduced to through research, some of them I've always known about. So the first one I want to speak about is Grieve by Mahmoud Sabri, who is an Iraqi artist. The painting is from the 1960s, and it's really a stunning emotional work when you look at it. It was not painted after a particular specific incident. So these people in the painting are not specific people. When you look at the work, you can see that, first of all, there is such a strong sense of composition here. The fact that the figures are sort of inside this invisible pyramid or triangle really makes it feel balanced. So there's a figure laying down at the bottom, a figure who has obviously died. I assume he's the martyr. The 3 women are different women in his family. So his mother, who lays on top of him, his sister, I assume, who's wailing out, and then his wife, who holds their baby. It's easy to make the assumption that that's his child because he is wearing white and the child is wearing white. And I think this is like a clever way for Sabri to use color as a way to tell us about the painting, or to reveal the story through color. He isn't showing us a scene of violence. He is showing us the aftermath of what happens because of violence. The next painting is very different, also by an Iraqi artist. It's called, wait, where is it? Bullet Trace by Saleh al-Jumayi. And this is a very different painting. It was painted in 1967. It is abstract minimalist, I suppose you'd say. And it is a painting of muted browns and grays, but right in the middle of it, there is this mass, and then something that looks like it's kind of carved or cleaved into the painting. And it is supposed to be reminiscent of a bullet wound, whether it's a bullet wound that has made its way through someone's flesh, or a bullet wound that has made its way into a structure like a building. But I think the more you look at this painting, the more it feels very familiar. Like I said, it could be a scar on someone's body, it could be a bullet wound, it could be damage on a structure or a building, it could be a map seen from like an aerial perspective of a damaged area, it could be the side of a home or a building. It's an image that we've seen versions of when we view images and photographs and footage of violence and war. He does not use figures. He's not showing any scenes of violence or triumph. He's not even showing blood. But this painting feels very violent. The next painting I wanted to talk about very quickly is Lebanon by Nabil Kenzo, which was painted in 1983. I only recently discovered Nabil Kenzo, and what an amazing artist he is. He creates these monumental, huge, overpowering works, like you can see in this painting, Lebanon, which is a vast vortex of figures and buildings crumbling and bodies falling and flailing, all in this like red tinged atmosphere. It's a vortex of violence, and it's really, really overpowering when you look at it. Nabil Kenzo, who was a Lebanese American artist, was living in New York at the time in the 1980s, and this was at the height of the Lebanese Civil War. I think he visited a few times and expressed what he saw through these works and through this massive work. And I think what's important to notice in the work that it feels like it has no beginning and end, and it's just this cycle of violence. But right in the center, there are these 2 female figures who are floating that are almost touching hands over a halo of light. And I would like to think that these 2 central figures are some kind of sign of hope in the middle of all of this violence. The last painting I want to talk about very quickly is one that is actually full of hope, and it's Freedom by Slimane Mansour, and it was painted in 1918. Slimane Mansour's work, he's a Palestinian artist, has gone viral so much over the past year. His paintings are they're iconic. They're very They very much express so much of Palestinian identity and the plight of the Palestinian people. And this painting in particular is, I think, one of its few that doesn't have any figures, but it has a bird, a dove, whose wings have been painted to look like the traditional Palestinian pattern of embroidery. And it's breaking out of a jail cell, a very rectangular, very man-made form. And the bars that it's broken out of are transforming into tree branches. And to the top left of the painting, there is a halo of light that's shining down on the dove. I mean, this is incredibly symbolic, a very incredibly symbolic work. And Sleiman Mansour uses symbols of Palestinian identity to not only represent Palestine, but to also speak about universal themes of freedom and liberation and hope. It's a very strong, gentle, quiet expression of defiance and freedom. So a really, really important and powerful work. So those four are kind of a little taste of the ones that you'll scroll down below and see. So let me know what you think of them, what you think of the story, and I hope you can share it. I hope you learned something, and that's it for me.